Another shirt on discount. I got it for $10. Looks like I'm headed to a Hawaiian luau, probably. Everybody told me they liked the two lava lamps, but they didn't like the fire going at the same time, so I think a lot of people left a lot of comments in the last video, and I said, "You sure you read every comment?" It's like I do read every comment. Oh, man. My birthday's this Friday. Oh, goodness. Be 53 years old. Too old to celebrate a birthday, right? By the way, I've got this red puffiness around my eye. It's due to allergies. It basically hasn't rained here in a month. I get this like once or twice a year, so if you think somebody slugged me, that's the incorrect answer. I've told people for many times that the information given about the shift is incorrect. The same is true of the dual slit experiment. And it kind of blows my mind. Everybody asks about the dual slit experiment or red shift and blue shift. And interestingly enough, it brought up a thing with the red lava lamp and the blue lava lamp, red shift and blue shift. It's like, after 8,000 some videos, I couldn't believe it that I've not made a video about red shift and blue shift. And it's one of the top proofs of the ether. I've told people many times that I could easily come up with 100 proofs of the ether, actual proofs of the ether. Whether you believe it or not is, of course, no concern of mine, but I'll make this outstandingly obvious. This usually called Doppler effect of light. Everybody knows about, I think everybody knows about the Doppler effect of a siren, like an ambulance, for example, as it's approaching you. You actually, of course, have a medium, that being the air, because sound is not an emission either. Nothing emits sound. What happens is a disturbance of a medium. Yeah, that being the oxygen and nitrogen of the air. So as a siren or a train whistle, whatever's approaching you, you get a compression front as it's approaching you, which would be analogous to blue shift and red shift as it's departing you. Unlike sound, as per light, and of course they think the ether doesn't exist, the relativity in its grand ignorance tried to replace the ether with space and time. Well, time doesn't exist, it's only a measure, and space has no properties, as Tesla famously quoted you. And they think, well, the Doppler effect is of waves, like, waves of what? And it's easy to trap them. It's like, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know who's on third, that whole Abbott and Costello routine. They'll say, well, of energy. So waves of what? Energy. It's like, we've never defined energy. Sure we have. Energy is the ability to do work. Well, that's descriptive. It's not explicative. It doesn't actually tell you what energy is. And they can't define energy. They never define the word energy. They never define the word field. As per red light and blue light, you can go look this up. You can find a million examples of this. Blue in spectrum light, on average, is about nearly 3 eV, visible blue light. 3 eV electrovolts higher than far spectrum red light. In other words, there's more power there. So blue light has more power, and the whole idea of light Doppler falls apart. What you're calling red shift and blue shift is what some people accurately call the Doppler effect of light. Yeah. And they'll admit that, of course, sound requires a medium, that being the air, but they'll also, too, tell you, this is from one of their websites, the formula for the Doppler effect in light differs from the formula for sound because light, unlike sound, needs no medium for propagation. Actually, it does. The frequency or wavelength, and a frequency is just a fancy way of saying waves. And once again, waves always shifts depending only on the relative speeds of the observer and the source. And there's a well-established formula for this, and I know what it is. And people say, well, math doesn't lie. It also doesn't tell the truth. Math is descriptive, and it's a way for getting reproducible results, but it doesn't tell you the answer to anything. Math never has. People love repeating that over and over. Math doesn't lie. The math doesn't lie. We've seen this in a million different science fiction shows. While that's superficially accurate, it's ultimately a lie. I could like pull out a whole pile of facts, but paint a completely incorrect picture for you by being selective in my understanding. This, of course, is all what Nikola Tesla meant about those who could think deeply but not clearly. You know, so since high capacitance blue shift analogously means if you're going down the road faster in your car, you know, if you're throwing pizza out the window, if you're accelerating towards something, they instantaneously change into ice cream. And of course that's completely ridiculous, but that's actually what these people, and it's kind of humorous, these people are saying. They say, well, light doesn't require a medium. Yeah, it does. There's only ever been two foundations for ultimate reality ever postulated by anybody. One's been the ether, and the other one has been very, very, very recently this idea of space-time, which is completely ridiculous, but you've been brainwashed to believe it by science fiction shows. I don't know if you've ever taken a rubber band. We did this when we were younger. We were really bored in class because public school is a total waste. You'll do anything to entertain yourself. You can actually take a rubber band and stretch it across your lip, and it'll get hot. And you can actually let it shrink back to its state, and it will get cool. This expansive, contractive premise. We're actually making contractile or expanding out a medium. In this case, of course, that being the rubber band. Proof of the ether is that this medium is a compression front. Now, in the case of sound, it'll emit the Doppler effect as a medium, which is undeniable. We all know that sound requires air to work, or any gas for that matter, but of course in this case we're talking about air. Emission, then, since they'll say, well, star Cygnus B is blue shifted, and we know it's accelerating towards us, and it's emitting light, and we know it's blue shifted. It's emitting light? Now, fundamentally, what they actually are telling you is that light Doppler breaks the law of conservation of energy, because blue light is nearly 3 eV, electrovolts, more powerful than red-end spectrum light. Then that's extremely stupid. Say you're throwing a rock out at the car and you're both standing still, and you accelerate towards the subject that's observing the rock, you know, and you're throwing it out and you got a more powerful rock because you're accelerating. I mean, light is not an emission. It breaks the law of conservation of energy, since blue light, I mean, this is not my opinion or theory or belief. I mean, this is well-established fact. Blue end spectrum light, as you go towards that end of the electromagnetic spectrum, becomes more powerful than red end spectrum light. Well, you can't break the law of conservation of energy. Light is not an emission. The fundamental 7 fallacies, everybody talks about the dual slit experiment. It's like, well, let's talk about the dual slit experiment. Well, sure, let's do that. Well, you can't do an experiment on anything if you don't know what the medium it is that you're testing. Like, well, I don't understand what you mean. Well, the dual slit experiment, the medium being experimented upon, is light. It's not about the dual slit. It starts out with 7, technically 8, false suppositions as to the nature of light. Light is not a wave, a wave-particle duality. It's not an emission. It's not moving. Sure it is. Everybody knows what c is the speed of light. That's not what c is. That's technically, as Nikola Tesla accurately said, the ratio between elasticity and density of the medium. This is specifically called the hysteresis of the medium, and that's the maximum rate of induction. The rate of induction is the thing that we call c. That's the disturbance rate at which a transverse phenomena, that being light because it has a spatial electromagnetic frequency. Light fundamentally is a pinch wrinkle or a compression of the ether itself, and this pinch is where they got the idea of the photon from. By the way, there's no such thing as a photon, and that's not me saying that. All the gods of field theory, there's no such thing as a photon. They also too said there's no such thing as an electron. This idea of a charge-carrying particle is completely destroyed, given the fact that wireless power induction works, and there are many, many, many countless patents that employ wireless power induction. Compression is capacitance. I used to do a lot of scuba diving and cave diving. If you know the size of the tank, you can actually determine how many cubic feet of air or nitrox or heliox, whatever gas is in the tank, is in there based upon, if you know the cubic foot of the tank, and the actual pressure. Well, right now it's 1,000 psi. Right now it's 3,000 psi. Higher the compression, the higher capacitance. Empty tanks are actually lighter. I mean, nobody thinks of air as being heavy, but you pressurize the tank to max with a couple burst discs in it, and even take it past max, not that you ever should. I mean, you can feel the weight of the air. I mean, the higher the compression, the higher capacitance. The idea that light's an emission, and also, too, breaks the law of conservation of energy, as per their idea that light doesn't require a medium. Well, light is a disturbance of the medium. Sound is a disturbance of another medium, because nothing emits sound, and the speed of sound is a misnomer. What we call the speed of sound is the hysteresis of the air. Now that actually changes depending on the temperature, but the temperature changes the density of the air, and therefore, too, it changes the rate of induction. The same is exactly true of light. The disturbance of light occurring at, I'm not saying passing through because light's not moving. Glass, it goes down by what, 15% or is it 18%? Depends on the glass. Same is true of water. And they'll say, well, light speeds back up after it leaves the water, or light speeds back up after it leaves. So that's impossible. You're saying that light has got a gas tank, and after it leaves the water or the glass, it is pushing on the gas pedal and speeding back up again? All of this breaks down from pure observation and experimental reproducible fact. There is nobody on this earth that denies that light, from their words, speeds back up after it leaves glass or water. Well, how do you explain that? You said that, well, I don't know what you mean. Well, you said that light is moving, and then it's a particle, a photon, and a wave-particle duality, which of course is completely ridiculous. There are no dualities in it. You've broken the law of conservation of energy. Your A doesn't match your B. It's completely incoherent. Compression is capacitance. Obviously, the higher the compression, the more gas cubic foot you have in the tank. And the same is true of the medium of light. The medium of light is the ether. And that's not my feeling or belief or theory. That's fact. Every observable phenomena of light posits the ether, and it doesn't posit warp space-time. It doesn't posit relativity. It doesn't posit photons and light moving at sea. Light is not moving. I am not emitting sound when I'm talking. I'm creating a disturbance in the air, which vibrates the microphone, which gets transferred into electrical signals, which gets recorded. I'm not emitting any sound, and nothing emits light either. There's not one person in a billion that knows this fact. There might be one in a billion. I mean, 8 billion. There's less than 500 people on this earth that know and understand that fact, which is really, really, really quite horrific, actually. Here's something else they say. Doppler shift is the change in the frequency of a wave. Wave of what? Due to the relative motion between the wave source and an observer. No. Wave source? Wave of what? Once again, they're saying that, if you got a person way over there and you're in the car and you throw a pizza out the window, that if you accelerate when you throw the pizza out the window, the pizza instantaneously transforms into ice cream. Red light can't transform, because they are inconsistent within themselves. They will tell you that light is a photon, and it's emission, and it's moving. They all admit that. Okay, let's run with that. Now you're saying that something that is emitting light, and it's a photon, from their crazy idea. Woo-hoo! Something is emitting red spectrum light, but now because it's moving towards me or XYZ, that the capacitance and the nature of the light fundamentally change. It's already been emitted. It's already emitting the light. Of course, nothing's emitting light. I'm using their crazy nonsense. It doesn't work. Now you say that the pizza thrown out by star ABC has now been transformed into ice cream light. even though it's already been emitted. Well, they're solely inconsistent within themselves. If light was an actual emission and a photon and a wave and a wave particle, blah, 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 redshift and blueshift would be absolutely impossible. Redshift and blueshift, or light Doppler, as it should be called, works exactly the same as sound does. But they'll tell you right here, the formula for Doppler effect in light differs from the formula for sound because it doesn't need a medium for propagation. Yes, it does. Because the whole observable, repeatable, scientific observation of what light does in light Doppler effect breaks down. If you think that something is emitting light, but all of a sudden, poof, magically the light drastically raises its capacitance by itself, independent of everything else, because once again they think light is a photon. Well, it's already been emitted. Now that the object is moving faster, it can't change its nature after its emission. Sure, it's so inconsistent. It is illogical. Well, the math of light Doppler is an established fact. Yes, but the math and the equation for light Doppler is not in question. They say, once again, that math doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the truth either. It doesn't explain anything. All math does is give you something that you could reproduce the results with given variables. People don't understand this. The dual slit experiment cannot be talked about unless, and the dual slit experiment is very, very, very simple. It's just about constructive and destructive interference of light. But you can't talk about, what about the dual slit experiment? Let's talk about it. You can't experiment on something if you don't know what it is you're experimenting on. What do you mean? All the suppositions they have about light are incorrect. It's not my opinion, it's fact. I can argue it before anybody and completely, take them off at the knees. They won't make it. In a formal debate in front of a crowd, go on, bring it. Bring it. You can't be, the only way that they could try to hoodoo you is to be completely inconsistent within themselves. They reified space, which has no properties. Space is the shadow of the ether, by the way. It's literally the negative image of the ether. They reified time, which is only a measure. Yeah, just like they reify the word quantum. I know the whole history of the word quantum. I got a one-page paper on quantum on my Substack. It totally destroys quantum. Not my feeling or opinion, it's a fact. I know exactly where quantum was popularized, who started it, who pushed it down the road, the context in which it's used. I know the whole usage of the word quantum. You think I don't know what quantum is? Well, old hairless monkey know exactly what the word quantum is. So we can't talk about the dual slit experiment unless you actually understand what light is. And then the dual slit experiment comes easy. To them, it's like mystical and magical. Oh, one photon's interfering with another. You think light is an emission and a particle and a wave particle. All that stuff is crazy. It's nutty talk. That's not even what light is. You're doing an experiment using light and drawing conclusions without actually knowing what light is. All the fundamental things, and humanity is not that evolved intellectually. The fundamental things that humanity thinks it understands, like light speed. Once again, this is hysteresis, the rate of induction. This is the ratio, as Tesla said, between elasticity and density of the ether. Let me take a couple quotes from Eric Dollard from his book. This is from Dollard, by the way. He completely destroys relativity in his books. Yeah, his books, the Lone Pine Writings, are worth purchasing on his website. The velocity at which light propagates, the luminal velocity c, is a property of the dielectric, be it the ether or tin sea oil. This velocity has no relationship to the motion of the transmitter itself, nor are its transmitted waves material projections. Nothing is blasted out of the moving laser. The electric field can only soak into the medium at the rate defined by that medium. This is the hysteresis of the medium. Light can only travel, luminal velocity is defined by the dielectric medium and its dimensional relationship of 1 over c squared. a numerical constant, which, by the way, didn't come from Einstein. This came from Henri Poincaré, from which Einstein, hijacked all his stuff that you think Einstein's famous for, he got from Henri Poincaré. Light is not a material projection. It is an inductive process, a process of the ether. Accurate. Writing with the laser in his experiment, mental experiment, is moving 50% of C. You'll see it as red. He's talking about two red lasers that are turned on. Yeah. It has a red wavelength and a red frequency. The stationary observer sees it as green, the one that's moving 50% of C. It is a green wavelength and a green frequency. Relative to the stationary observer, you riding the moving laser, you see the length is longer, i.e. red versus green, and time is slower. Of course, time is only a measure. Time does change relative to velocity, and this is why time is absolutely relative. And this is not supporting relativity in saying that, by the way. Time is only a measure. It is, however, that Einstein may have left out a few details. The stationary laser puts out a red spot on its target. It's a red laser, just like the moving laser. They're both red lasers. They're both red. Big deal. But wait, Mr. Wizard, look, the spot on the moving laser, the target, is green. The light looks green because of the Doppler effect of light. This is a situation where wavelength of light shortens and the frequency increases, maintaining a constant velocity. And of course, it's not actually moving, so he's wrong when he uses the word velocity, but we get what he's saying. The moving laser is traveling with a velocity of 50% of c. The wavelength shortens by the square of the root of 50%. The frequency increases by the square of the root of 50%. Hence, the red light is forced to become the green light. The speed of this, of course, not an actual speed, it's the rate of induction, so he gets that wrong, is still c. In his thought experiment, you got two red lasers. One is moving 50% of c, but the target on the one that's moving 50% of c relative to the stationary red laser, it has a green dot on its target instead of the red one on the stationary red laser. One thing he doesn't get into is what I've already gone into, is that, if you actually go with their idea about laser light being an emission and a speed and a photon and a wave and a particle, wave particle, it completely falls apart. It can't work. Light Doppler is exactly the same as sound Doppler. The medium of sound is the air. The medium of light is the ether. Redshift and blueshift, not my opinion, fact, cannot exist unless there is a medium. Nor could you explain all observed phenomena of light. You can't do that if you think it's a photon, a particle, wave particle, blah, 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 blah. They're nonsense. You can't explain it. It's all completely inconsistent with everything else. But if you understand what the ether is and what light is, it's all extremely consistent. Extremely so. This is part of Dollard completely dismantling relativity, which of course is a pile of error and nonsense. By the way, what Walter Russell said about relativity is called a mass of error. There's a reason why Tesla called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot and a fool. He actually called him a fuzzy-haired crank. A crank is an old English word meaning a fool. Call him a fuzzy-haired crank. But if you go with what they will always tell you, is light an emission? Yeah, it's an emission. Is it a photon? Yes, it's a photon. Is it a wave particle duality? Yeah, it's all that stuff. Yeah. So you're saying that star A, B, C, X, Y, Z, whichever one you pick, whether it's redshift or blueshift, makes no difference. The analogy still holds. Is emitting light, whether it's moving towards us, away from it, or stay. Yes, yep. I said, well, its movement, the light's already been emitted. It can't transform from pizza into ice cream. You already got the pizza flying in space, not literally. Flying in space by your idea of photon emission, traveling at the speed of light. An emission. Light is not an emission. Nothing emits light. Nothing emits sound either. It is utterly inconsistent within itself. And that is not my theory. That is a fact. You can't argue that. So, yes, I can make a list of at least 100 proofs of the ether. One of the top 5 ones is light Doppler. because, yeah. Man, they're so inconsistent. The only thing that actually blows my mind is not their ignorance, but that everybody else is so extremely ignorant that they can't see that it's full of holes worse than Swiss cheese. And it is. I wanted to get into talking about gravity and polarized fields and magnetism, but I really wanted to focus in on redshift and blue shift, or light Doppler, but also to go into the dual slit experiment, which is a huge intellectual fallacy. We could talk about it, but first we have to understand what light is. And when they did that experiment, they had no idea what light is. None. Zip, zilch, zero, nada. And that ain't my opinion, girlfriend. That is a fact. Lux e veritas. I hope you like these videos. I have a lot of articles for you in the description below to download. If you like my videos and the fact that my birthday is here in a couple days, any donations always warmly welcome. I hope you have a lovely week. Thank you so much for watching. This shirt is like hot. What is it made out of? Like compressed bear fur or something? It is hot. This shirt is hot. I don't mean like hot visually, it means like hot to wear. Thank you. And goodbye.